Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into the latest team preview video. I am going to be doing the Baltimore Ravens today. What you can expect if this is your first time tuning in to my team preview series. I'm going to quickly share my thoughts on their head coach, John Harbaugh. Then I'm going to take a look at the team's remaining cap space, see if they have any room to work with as far as acquiring players prior to the season, maybe making some trades or giving out some contract extension. Notable guys that are in a contract year that have been on the team for the last couple years. Then I do look at the offense, I do look at the defense, I give my overall feelings at the end of the episode. And then when I am going over the offense, I kind of give it a fantasy football perspective when I'm doing that, just so if anybody wants to know my opinions on guys I'm trying to draft or avoid this year. So let's get this thing rocking. Coach Harbaugh, he's one of the best coaches in the league. He keeps the Ravens as a winning program year in and year out. I know even though he has that Super Bowl win, there was people wondering if he was still the man for the job a few years ago. They drafted Lamar Jackson. He completely switched his offense to build it around Lamar, which led to Lamar's MVP season. Last year, they end up beating the Titans on the road, and then they lost to the Bills in the divisional round. So I guess what we're trying to look out of John Harbaugh now, even though he has a Super Bowl on his resume, is they need to go on a deep playoff run. They have not been to the AFC Championship game since 2013, the year that they won the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. So they are looking to finally get back to that level of the playoffs. Other than that, I mean, I don't know what's there to pick apart from Harbaugh. I mean, I guess you can get on him to get on his offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, to switch some things up with their play calling and maybe be more creative with ways they can be with their passing plays. But other than that, I mean, Harbaugh has his team competitive every year. They're in the playoffs more times than not. He has a Super Bowl on his resume, and then he's just one of those coaches where he's in that realm with like Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin, right? They're great coaches, Super Bowl resume, but it just seems like they haven't been to their conference championship game in 5+ years. So he's another coach that is looking to change that this year. But let's just keep this moving then to the team's remaining cap space. They're sitting at $7.5 million in cap space, so they have a little room to work with if they want to give anybody a bump in their pay raise this year. If they want to give out any contract extensions, they probably could do that as well. There is some space if they wanted to go acquire more talent, either as depth pieces or maybe making a trade for somebody that could help out their roster for that potential deep playoff run. But taking a look at guys that are entering a contract year, Mark Andrews, that's the number one guy I think they maybe should work something out prior to the season. I think he's been Lamar's right-hand man, his trusty target when it comes to the passing attack. And I think he's somebody that you should want to keep in the building because he does so much for Lamar. He gives him that big body presence when they're in the red zone. So if there's one guy on that list that you're looking at that I think that we could see maybe some type of contract extension prior to the season for Baltimore, it is Mark Andrews. Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams, they're really good, but they're at what? They're in the they're almost to their mid-30s at this point. So definitely don't see a contract extension for those guys. We'll have to see if they can keep their level of play up to par to maybe get something at the end of the season. Same thing goes with Bradley Bozeman and Pernell McPhee. Those are guys are getting older as well, up there in age as well. With Bradley Bozeman too, there's a number of guards that they have behind him that they're hoping to develop that they could probably replace him in the lineup for next year in 2022. And Deshaun Elliott, he did a nice job filling in for Earl Thomas after that whole debacle last offseason, if anybody remembers that. But we'll definitely have to see if he is able to take that next step in his play. If not, they're probably going to be looking for options on the market, or maybe they do work something out with him at the end of the season. Don't expect anything prior to this season. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and keep it moving then to the offensive preview. These are the projected starters from the man, Zach Garton. You can give Zach a follow on Twitter at all22_addict. He pumps out great content. I know he's coaching now in high school, so that's definitely keeping him busy. So yeah, definitely go give Zach a follow to keep up with his latest, what he's doing in the industry. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get going with this. Oh, really quick before I even move on, this is pulled from the Prospect Encyclopedia. Obviously, injuries happen, so some of this stuff might not be up to date. Everything was submitted in late July, so these were final edits came down like at the end, right there at the beginning of August before it was published. If you see any stars next to these names, that means they have a scouting report written by Zach in the Prospect Encyclopedia that you can go check out, and you can order it at prospectencyclopedia.com. Anyways, let's just keep this moving. Lamar Jackson, obviously, he's one of the better quarterbacks in the league. He's a top 10 quarterback to me. He's so explosive with his legs and his ability to make people miss in open space. He's steadily improved as a passer as he's developed in the league. And then obviously you want to see him, be more of a work in the boundary, taking more deep shots and giving his wide receivers more of a chance to succeed for him to take the next step as a quarterback. I don't know if it's much more on Lamar Jackson, if it's more on the play calling that they're doing, as I mentioned earlier. But you just want to see him be, I don't know, I just want to see him put the team on his back in a fourth quarter, down 10, down 14, and carve up a defense with his arm and lead a comeback. I mean, that's all you're really kind of looking out of him, but if you're really nitpicking his game. But other than that, he's been one of the best quarterbacks over the last 3 years. So let's take a look at some stats that he popped up in for me during my stat collection this summer. Lamar Jackson since 2018. Now this is not specifically a since 2018 stat, but he is currently tied for the 7th longest active streak with at least one passing touchdown in a game. He's got 7 games in a row right now. And then obviously I just talked up his effectiveness on the ground with his legs. He's got the most rushing yards per game for a quarterback. He's got the most fantasy football points per game for a quarterback, the second most rushing touchdowns. He's tied for the second most rushing yards per attempt. Now, he's got the 7th most rushing yards, including running backs. Out of all players, he's got the 7th most rushing yards since 2018, which is the most for a quarterback. And he's got the 8th best passer rating. So yeah, that's what you love for Lamar out as a fantasy quarterback, is that he has such a high floor because of his rushing ability. At any given moment, he's going to he can take the ball, tuck it, and run for 20 plus yards, if not 40 plus yards, and score a touchdown. And then, like I mentioned, his running ability is a benefit to the offense because he can help stretch out plays, which helps get guys open like Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown, and among the other wide receivers that are on the team. As far as how I view him, obviously he's a top 1 or 2 quarterback in fantasy. If you're going to draft him, you're probably going to have to draft him in that 2nd to 4th round range. For me, I'm not a big guy on drafting quarterbacks that high in fantasy. You can count me in the waiting game on that. But if you do, I understand. I'm also the believer. Like I do, not only I'm kind of weird with it, right? Like I don't like to draft a quarterback in the first 5 rounds, but I also like a quarterback I can plug and play. I don't have to worry about replacing him until his bye week. So Lamar Jackson is one of those guys. I just would rather draft other positions on where he is going. But if you are a Lamar Jackson fan, if you're a Ravens fan, I totally understand and trust me. I was always drafting Peyton high in drafts as a Colts fan, so I completely can get behind drafting that because he's going to win you multiple games throughout the season by himself because he's going to rack up so many points. And like I mentioned, he's got the most fantasy football points per game since 2018 among all quarterbacks. Other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and keep this moving to the running back position. They got a nice little 1-2 punch in the backfield. They got their young guy. They're looking to take a 2nd-year leap in J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins finished really strong last year. He is actually tied for the 3rd longest active streak with at least 50 rushing yards in a game. So he's got 6 games in a row. He kind of finally took over the role at the back end of the year. They stopped really utilizing Mark Ingram. It was just mainly a J.K. Dobbins show with Gus Edwards. And the two of them, they're really good at picking up like that 4 to 6 yards a carry, which is what this offense is built around, is the rushing attack. I think he's a nice complement to Lamar. I think he's got a solid receiving ability as well, and I think he's going to take his next step and he's going to blossom into a nice fantasy football running back to own as well. I view him more as I kind of view him more as a flex right now, borderline RB2 on rosters, but I think at some point he's going to be a steady RB2 in your lineup. I think he would make a nice like little 1-2 punch with if you draft a running back in your first round, maybe go wide receiver tight end in the second or third round and try to get him maybe in the third or fourth round for your roster. But I think J.K. Dobbins is set to have a huge role. He's still gaining that NFL experience, as you can see with that star next to his name. That means he has less than 12 career regular season starts. And so once he gets more of the nuances of the game, I think he's going to be very effective in this Ravens rushing attack, especially this year too, because they really bolstered up the offensive line with the drafting of Ben Cleveland and the addition of Kevin Zeitler at the guard position. So the rushing attack is going to be slightly better too as well. Now Gus Edwards is no joke too. He's a very solid backup running back. There was some stat on him too where he was one of like 4 players. I forget the stat. It was something entering last year where he was averaging a lot of yards per attempt, which shows his ability to come in and fill his role in case JK ever needs a break and needs a breather. So if anything ever happens to JK Dobbins, Gus Edwards is definitely one of those handcuffs to own in fantasy football. He's definitely worth adding to your bench. You definitely don't want to play him unless JK does get hurt. But he's somebody you can maybe stash and see how this whole situation plays out as long as JK can stay healthy. But if JK does stay healthy throughout the year, obviously I don't think there's going to be much value for Gus as strong as he is. But if you're in deep leagues, he's definitely worth keeping on your bench. Now moving on to the wide receivers. This is a very unique, I would say, group. You're looking. They made a couple different additions this offseason because they're like I mentioned earlier, they needed to make some changes to their passing attack. They had to get more creative, finding guys that are going to fit Lamar's playing style, and they did attempt to do that. They did add Sammy Watkins, who's supposed to be utilized in the passing attack. He can maybe create that separation for Lamar and be a deep threat, work the intermediate routes for but I don't really see him providing much of a value in fantasy. But I think he's going to be a solid addition whenever he is on the field for Lamar, especially now that Rashad Bateman, who was their first round pick this year, he's expected, I believe, to miss like the first 3 to 4 weeks. He brings more of a bigger body possession type of play for Lamar when they get closer to the red zone. I think he's going to be a very nice addition to complement everybody else in the wide receiver room once he gets on the field, because he's basically the opposite of a Marquise Brown, a Sammy Watkins, and the guys on the bench as well. He's the center of this basketball team, if that makes any sense. He's going to go up. He's going to win 50-50 balls, and he's a pretty solid route runner as well, so he can get himself open within the holes of the defense. So I think they're going to really benefit once he gets back in the lineup. Probably early October. I think that's what they're betting on for him to come back. As far as fantasy though, with that injury, you don't have to draft him. He's definitely going to be on the waiver wire. Just keep that in mind. Like, if no wide receiver emerges as a week in and week out fantasy play in Baltimore, keep an eye on Rashad Bateman's return, because he might be that guy, and try to scoop him up about a week or two to add on your bench and see if he does come in and make an immediate impact when he does return. Now Marquise Brown is entering his year 3. If you guys have been paying attention, and if you guys watched my first YouTube video, you know I love year 3 wide receivers. With that being said, Marquise Brown has been very inconsistent ever since he's entered the league. But I don't think that's much to his fault. Again, I keep on pointing to their passing attack. I don't think it's really benefited him. He does get that great separation. We just want to see him and Lamar connect more often. You want to see more of a consistent target load for Marquise Brown, and I think he may be setting himself. I think he might be setting himself up for a huge year 3 in his uptick in production. He's got an opportunity with Rashad Bateman out of the lineup. He can maybe take over and be in the lead dog in this wide receiver room, and I think it's potentially could happen. For me, Marquise is going so late in drafts. I think he's worth a swing to add on your bench. And if he does have that year 3 boom and he finally turns from Marquise into Hollywood Brown, I think you might have a sneaky wide receiver 3 on your roster that can give you explosive playmaking weeks and help you win throughout the year. Again, you don't have to count on him anymore with where he's going in fantasy football drafts. You can just add him to your bench and see if he does indeed have a year 3 boom in his career. And then they do have like Tylan Wallace, they can work in as well. Devin Duvernay, I thought flashed some really great speed in his limited opportunities last year. So yeah, they got guys they can work into the rotation too. But overall, it's just like it's a group with a lot of speed. And when Rashad Bateman gets in there, he'll add some of that size. And I think if they can get creative with those guys, I think the passing attack should be a lot better than what it has been over the last couple years. Now, I already mentioned his name. One guy that's a kind of a steady Eddie in their passing attack, Mr. Reliable for Lamar Jackson, is Mark Andrews. And I think people should not forget about him in fantasy football. It seems like a lot of people do not really mention his name when you talk about tight ends. But keep in mind, since 2018, Mark Andrews, among tight ends, has the 4th most receiving touchdowns. He's tied for the 4th most receiving yards. He's got the 5th most receptions, and he's 7th. He's got the 7th most fantasy football points per game. So there's no other like Hayden Hurst or anybody like that. Like Nick Boyle is going to come back from his injury last year, but he's a blocking tight end. So he is the tight end. He's going to get all the snaps. He's going to get a bunch of red zone targets. So yeah, Mark Andrews is a guy I would be comfortable drafting in fantasy. He's never going to like blow up and maybe give you like huge numbers, but he's going to give you those 5+ receptions, close to about 50 yards a game. And he's going to, especially with Rashad Bateman out of the lineup, he's more than likely going to be that guy that's seeing a lot of red zone targets when they get into the end zone. So I think Mark Andrews is is one of those tight ends that you can count on. Like if you miss one of the elite tight ends in Waller, Kelsey, or Kittle, there's 3 tight ends right now I currently feel like that are safe picks. That is Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, and Logan Thomas. So those are about the 6 tight ends I think I am targeting in fantasy. So if you have an opportunity to draft Mark and you want a tight end that you can count on week in and week out, I would definitely swoop him up. And then I've already kind of mentioned the offensive line's improved. They get Ronnie Stanley back. I believe he was hurt part of the year last year. They drafted Ben Cleveland, who's a big boy. Bradley Bozeman's very solid center. Kevin Zeitler has been one of the best guards over the past decade. Obviously, he's getting older, so you want to hope his play is up to par. And then Andrew Villanueva wasn't the best left tackle for the Steelers last year, but he's going to flip over to the right side, and he should be a nice little bookend tackle situation with Stanley. So these are guys that are going to move the ball. They're going to open up space for J.K. Dobbins and Lamar Jackson. They should be giving Lamar plenty of time to scan the field and make his reads and make the proper throw. Overall for this offense, I mean, you know what you're going to get from them. They're going to be one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. But you're like, okay, well, we want to see you get to the AFC Championship game. So they have to do something to elevate the passing attack. I'm not saying it's Lamar's fault. I'm saying there's ways you can get creative with the weapons you have on your offense where you can not be so dependent on the run. If they can maybe get more of a, I don't remember the stats on how run heavy they were last year, but it's like if they can even get to like that 55 to 60% rushing and kind of get more of a balance with their passing attack, I think that's where this offense can be more deadly and be a consistent top 5 offense week in and week out. That's all I'm trying to see out of this offense. There's no other questions about it. It's just they are one of the better offenses in the league, but you know how capped is your ceiling with how you've been calling plays from the last year and a half. I'm going to go ahead and keep it moving to the defense. Again, the projected starters are pulled from the Prospect Encyclopedia. You can go order it at prospectencyclopedia.com. And this is from the man himself, Zach Garton. Do go give Zach a follow on Twitter at all22_addict. And the Ravens, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get one of the best defenses in the league. I mean, it's just in their DNA, no matter who's in the lineup for them. But it doesn't matter because they have I really like the potential of this defense this year. Once again, because I think they have a nice balance of veterans and youth that should keep things playing at a high level. Starting at the interior of their defensive line, Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams, and Calais Campbell. I mean, you're talking about some old, aging bulls that know how to dominate in the trenches. So they're going to be commanding presence, which should open up things on the outside and make their inside linebackers be able to flow over the field and make some plays. Calais Campbell did pop up in a stat I collected this summer. I think this is from a couple of years ago. I think maybe even with the Jaguars, but he still popped up on it. He's one of 7 players with a season of 67 plus tackles, 13 plus tackles for a loss, 16 plus quarterback hits, and 9 plus sacks since 2018. He's at the back end of his career, but he can still have his dominant stretches in games. And then guys are going to be coming off the edge. They did sign Justin Houston, who is up there in age, but he is tied for the most fumble recovery since 2018. So if anybody's able to knock that ball out, he's more likely going to get his hands on it. And here's another fun fact about Justin Houston. If he gets a safety this year, he will have the most forced safeties in NFL history. So I'm cheering on him to get that done this year. Opposite of him, they got Pernell McPhee, another older veteran that understands how to use his technique and his pass rushing ability. Now, keep in mind, not only they got those older guys, but they got some guys who are going to work in that rotation on the defensive front. I like Justin Madubuike. He's going to be the future of the interior of their defensive line, why they might be comfortable moving on from Calais after the end of this year. I like his explosiveness out of his stance, and I'm looking to see him take his next step in year 2. Jalen Ferguson, he's not a world beater, but he's a nice guy to have within the rotation. He can get after the quarterback. They spent the first round pick on Odafe Oweyi. I probably just totally butchered his name, but he's going to get a significant amount of snaps too. I would not be surprised if he ends up earning a starting role at some point throughout the season. And so those guys are going to work into the rotation. So I really like what they have. They have a nice, strong veteran presence up front and some youthful guys that can give the older guys a break and get after the quarterback. I'm excited about Patrick Queen. He was technically Isaiah Simmons is a linebacker, but he was my linebacker 2 in his class. I love his ability to fly over the field, and like I just mentioned, with all those guys up front, I think he's going to set to have continue his development from last year into year 2. Malik Harrison, it was a solid linebacker out of Ohio State. He showed some good things last year too. I think those guys can make a nice little 1-2 punch. And like I mentioned, Brandon Williams, Campbell, and Wolf are going to eat up some space in the middle of that defense. So those guys are going to be able to fly up into side gaps and close down on running plays pretty easily. And that should also help them sit back in coverage and be able to read and react to balls. And then their secondary, I would say it's solid. I wouldn't say it's overly impressive, but I think they benefit from having a great defensive front. They have a really good cornerback tandem in Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, basically polar opposites of playing style when it comes to your cornerback play. Marcus Peters, everybody knows he has a knack to get his get his hands on the ball and create those turnovers, get those pick sixes. He's actually tied for the third most interceptions since 2018. He has 12, and then Marlon Humphrey popped up in a couple stats. He's tied for the third most forced fumbles. Since 2018, he has 11, but one little note on that: 8 of those 11 forced fumbles came in one season, which is not a knack against him. I'm just pointing that out, which is actually the most in a season he's tied with Chandler Jones, for the most by an active player in a season. So he's basically this generation's Peanut Tillman, Charles Tillman. If you guys remember him from his played for the Bears and played for the Panthers back in the day. And then Marlon Humphrey also is tied for the 4th most pass deflections with 40. So he's got very good ball skills. Like I mentioned, he's more of that sticky guy in coverage. He'll look to create those turnovers by getting his hands on the ball and punching the ball out. And then Marcus Peters is the guy that's getting the interception. So, but he's more likely not only he takes the chances, but sometimes that's a detriment to his play because he'll give up those big chunk plays. And then Tavon Young is a solid nickelback. And then I just think the safety tandem, Chuck Clark is solid at what he does. And like I said, Deshaun Elliott filled in nicely, but I mean, it's not a world beating safety group. And we'll have to see if Brandon Stevens or Adarius Washington too can maybe work into that rotation as the season progresses. But overall, this Baltimore defense, I think it's just a very good unit. It's more of a top 15 unit for me, just because I do wonder, like, is there going to be a drop off on play from those aging veterans? How consistent will they be throughout the year? Obviously, you're betting on Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison both having very great year twos, and then getting consistent pressure from, you got the older veterans in Houston and McPhee, and then their first round pick as well. So there's a lot of not I want to say a lot. There's just some things that have to come together for this to be a top 10 unit. It's definitely a top 15 unit. I just wonder if they're going to be getting the consistent pressure off the edge, and then how well the secondary will play throughout the year. And then overall for this Baltimore team, I mean, I think we know what we're going to get, right? Like, this is not much of a different team from last year. They're going to be one of the better rushing attacks on offense this year. And like I mentioned earlier, we just want to see the next elevation, the next evolution of their passing attack. We want to see something different. We want to see something more unique, and having more of a variety of how you're going to attack the opposing team's secondary. And if they can take that next step, I think that's also going to help their rushing attack, which will open up rushing lanes for J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Lamar as well. So I think there's a lot of potential that this offense can be super explosive, even more than what it is with the rushing game, if they can figure out to get a nice little balance with the passing attack with their ground game. And then the defense, like I mentioned, I think it's just going to be a very solid defense. It has the makings to be a top 10 defense. You just want to see some of these guys keep up their level of play that are older veterans, and some of the youthful guys being more of heavy contributors this year. But I mean, if everything does come together, I mean, they have the potential to be, a top 10 unit because of you got Patrick Queen in the middle, Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters in the back, and then, like I mentioned, Campbell, Williams, and Wolf are going to eat up the interior of offensive line. So you like what they have. It's an overall solid team that can survive the AFC North. They definitely have what it takes to win the division. They should be competing for a playoff spot at the end of the year. And literally, I think everything would have to, it would have to be a disaster for this team not to be in the playoff picture at the end of the season. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to say on them, other than that we are just looking for them to finally get back to the AFC Championship game. So yeah, that's my video today, guys, on the Ravens. I do appreciate you guys tuning in, as always, if you stayed for the entire video. If you enjoyed this video today, please hit that like button. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get that number up as we inch closer to the season. If you have not checked out any of my other team previews, make sure you go check them out. I have this is Team 26, so we are almost getting all 32 teams done. The next team I will be doing will be the New Orleans Saints, so that will be coming up tomorrow. And yeah, other than that, this was coming to the Prospect Encyclopedia. Please make sure you guys go check that out. There's a lot of great writers in there, including myself, that was able to work on that product. My man Robert Robinson made that thing look so beautiful. It's so aesthetically pleasing. And you can get all 32 teams' top 22 prospect list, their scouting reports, for only $15. And if you're a Ravens fan and maybe you don't care about all 32 teams, you can get the Ravens section and read Zach's work for only $1. Keep in mind too, if you want to get a taste of it, I wrote the Bucks section. The Bucks section is actually free to download at prospectencyclopedia.com, so that can at least give you a taste of what you can expect. And if you like what you see, go order the Ravens section, or go. The way I view it is, yeah, you can get the Ravens section for $1, but you can get all 32 teams for only $15. So go check it out if you haven't yet. If you have, I appreciate the support. But other than that, I'll see you when I do the New Orleans Saints video tomorrow. Peace out.